welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide. I am, of course, Dan. With me, of course, is Josh.
Hello, everybody.
And tonight, we're going to be discussing all things quizzical, because we are on Email Palooza number 3.
Yeah, we're in the wake of our technical problems and general work being
Malaise.
a bear for me recently, my day gig, that is. We're being lazy and we're doing 2 email episodes in a row. Save me having to do some actual prep because we've got some topics coming up here that I actually want to be a little bit more prepared for than I usually am. So I will do another,
okay.
Hey, people sent us emails and we'll go. I like this. This could just maybe convert to a... No, it won't. We won't convert to just an email show.
No.
We only have shows when we get emails. No, we've got lots of stuff to go over.
Yeah, we'll have way too much content coming up. And literally, every time we have something slated to talk about and emails come in, we either truncate that episode and do the emails along with it, or we bump it entirely when we have as many emails as we've gotten recently. So we have content we will get to, but your emails are more important. At least they're first on our priority. So, Josh, you want to start off with the last minute edition that we just got?
This one arrived this afternoon as we are recording. It is from Scott. Scott writes, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I have been playing Earthdawn for over a year now, and it is rapidly becoming my favorite game.
Nice.
I heard about your podcast a bit late, so I am currently binge listening my way through it now, currently on episode 23. So he's about halfway through.
Wow, you're quick.
Well, I mean, if you don't sleep, you can get through that much in a day.
That's true. We did
on one of the previous podcasts, Josh had mentioned that the Shield Bash talent does not give a character a second attack because it takes the normal melee attack. So a sword and board character could make their melee attack to hit with their sword or their shield, but not both. My question is, would Shield Bash be usable under the second attack option or second weapon talent? Thanks for keeping the podcast going. Scott." It's possible we've answered this before. This is a question that comes up not infrequently.
Often.
Shield Bash is not... I don't think it actually says in the book, but I think the errata basically says that it is not compatible with second weapon or second attack. That Shield Bash is really nice. Like it combines a regular attack with a combat option. That is the attack to knockdown, which is really nice. And so
damage and knocking down.
Yeah. And as at least officially, it is not compatible with any of those multiple attack talents. So no, I don't think it actually says that in the rulebook. I think it's errata that was brought in to clarify after the fact.
Fair. Okay. One of these days I'm going to find all the errata, but that's just me.
If you go to facagames.com and up in the menus, you collect there's an Earthdawn thing and there's Earthdawn resources. The very first link on the resources page, it's in big, like, bright red. Here is a link to the official FAQ, and it links to a Google Doc that only Morgan and I have access to edit, but anybody can view it, and it has all of the errata. Basically, they sort of get updated it gets updated as we take care of them. And also, because some of the books have now gone to a second print, we have highlighted the header for it if that errata has actually been incorporated into the second printing of a book. But it's got Player's Guide, Game Master's Guide, Companion, Travar, Mystic Paths. Like, it's got, as questions come up and whether, like, it's not just errata, it's also like some clarifications and things like that. But yeah.
Okay.
It's right off the FASA Games page. Feel free to, like, bookmark it, because that is where it is sort of a living document, and as things get changed and updated, they get updated there. And so it's worth always going to take a look.
Fair enough. I can hear like 50,000 different people pausing this podcast right now and going and doing that. And then they're coming back. Welcome back, everybody. On to our next email. We got this one from Corey. Hey guys, Corey again. Sorry about that. Corey 3 times. Before I start to get into yet another long email, I need to get something very serious out of the way. During the episode on Obsidian, Josh referred to Teal'c as Goa'uld. Teal'c is in fact a Jaffa. The Goa'uld are the race of alien parasites that possess human hosts. Sorry, could not resist giving you a hard time.
I will accept that correction because I did not actually follow Stargate SG-1 that closely. I watched Stargate Atlantis a little bit more, but I was never hugely into those shows because Stargate SG-1, I remember, was on like a pay channel or something that I didn't have.
Fair.
Or something. Like, I mean, I'm familiar with the show and, like, the names of stuff in there I could absolutely have gotten wrong, which I did.
No worries. I didn't watch the show, but my friends did, so they're probably listening to the last podcast, and they'll be texting me as soon as they do.
I am perfectly willing to be corrected when I am wrong about stuff.
We're all human. That's why we keep an errata page for Earthdawn, because
I'm just
every once in a while things need to get clarified. Yeah. So obviously not that big of a deal. So back to Earthdawn. I do have one possible correction. In the episode on group patterns, you stated that if any member of the group dies, the group pattern dies. But the player's guide says it does not.
This may be a misremembering on my part of version changes.
Fair.
I seem to recall in first edition that if a member of a group pattern died, that you had a certain amount of time to either bring them back or reform the group pattern without them, or it would be lost. And the 4th edition book might not have that in there. So, yeah, I'm not...
Josh has a lot to keep track of. No, fair. I would say go with the player's guide as it's written, just because Josh is trying to keep 4 different versions of Earthdawn in his head. So,
well, 2.5.
2.5. No worries. So now on to Corey's usual questions and thoughts. When you answered my question about bonuses to thread weaving, as it turns out thread weaving tests from thread items, you did understand my question correctly. So I failed to see what was right in front of my eyes. Thank you for that clarification. Yay, Josh. Your answer did inspire me to think of another thread-related question. In case of the limit on the number of permanent threads woven for multiple discipline characters, I assume the limit is based on the highest of their thread weaving talents and not the total ranks.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I forget. This actually came up on the Discord channel like just the other day. And it actually says in the book that the limit is based on their highest circle. Page 219 of the player's guide. At any time, a character can have a maximum number of active permanent threads equal to his highest thread weaving talent rank. So your limit is 15. That is the maximum number of permanent threads that you can have. That's assuming that you have your talent capped at 15, which is the highest that you can. And so there is a limit that is intentional, because it is a resource. I'm checking on the group pattern thing. Hold on. Yeah, it looks like it did get changed. Reading page 235 of the 4th edition player's guide under group continuation. If a character dies and is not brought back to life, the surviving members of the group can still benefit from the group true pattern.
Okay.
If the dead character is brought back to life in the future, they must rejoin the group and reweave threads to the pattern item to benefit from it. Because when a character dies, all of their threads go away. So they would have to, that's why they would have to do that.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I guess it was tweaked, and I just didn't remember doing that. Okay. Probably because of the difficulty in bringing people back to life.
Yeah, I suspect so.
Because either you bring them back to life like right away with a last chance salve or a
spell, last chance
spell or something along those lines. Otherwise, like bringing somebody back from the dead is a significant feat. Yeah. That takes some doing. Okay. Well, there we go.
A lot of doing. So, yeah.
So
right,
again,
cool. Corey has 2 more points. Hey, so I would write this stuff down so we don't have to remember it. Regarding the episode on masks, I really like masks. Thank you, Corey. I have mentioned that I am running a campaign introducing some new players to Earthdawn. One of the things I wanted to do early on was to show the PCs some of the things that make Earthdawn unique. So after a fight with a swarm of blood bees, the next thing I dropped on them was a pack of cadaver dogs. I felt like cadaver men were too powerful to drop onto a group of first circle adepts, but the cadaverous mask allowed me to find a circle-appropriate threat for the party and give it the flavor of cadaver men, without overpowering the party. My last thought and question for the day is, has FASA ever considered creating a site like DM's Guild, Storypath Nexus, Storyteller's Vault, etc.? I really love the idea and think more companies should consider doing something like it. Keep up the good work, Corey.
Yes, thank you for the word about the masks, Corey. We like masks too, and what you did is exactly what they are intended for. Cadaver men are especially one of those stealth surprises that I love dropping on new players to the game because they treat them like normal zombies and then they don't act like normal zombies. And so doing them with dogs or whatever so that they're a little bit less of a challenge is chef's kiss.
Well done, Corey.
Yes. To answer the question, has FASA ever considered creating a site like DM's Guild, StoryPath Nexus, etc.? It has been asked. We have not talked about it. I don't really have anything more to say about it.
Fair. Stay tuned. We'll see. Okay. On to an email we got from Joe, host of The Relative Dimension. So, Joe, hello, Josh and Dan. I've been meaning to write this for a bit, but just haven't had the time until now. Well, it is COVID Nation, so here's all the time you need. In regards to spreading the word about Earthdawn, I have a few suggestions. I don't know how many of them are feasible or not, but I'll just list some of the ideas. Since I'm preparing to begin a live-streamed game of Earthdawn, most of these ideas involve podcasts or live streams, since it seems to be a rather untapped potential for mostly free advertising. So since he's got 5 points to make, I'll have Josh ask or answer as we make each point. So point 1, promote podcasts and streamers. I know you have mentioned some of these on the EDSG, but perhaps see about a channel in the Discord so that the content creators can discuss their stuff like we have over in the SCN Discord. And then ask those podcasters and streamers...
Yeah, SCN being Shadowcasters Network.
Oh, right. And then ask those podcasters and streamers to promote the FASA Discord to bring their audience over. So, thoughts?
I think it's a good idea. We're looking at ways to kind of improve our Discord experience. For people who are using it and whatnot. So that is
fair.
A possibility. I'll have to bring it up to our tech guy and maybe bring it up in a company meeting or something and say, hey, this was a suggestion. I think it's a decent idea. I mean, it would, having that would be great. And then, it's just a matter of people coming over and actually taking advantage of it.
Sweet. Point number 2, set up a folder with some artwork or logos that content creators can use on their streams or podcast links. Official artwork might grab more attention, and these streams and podcasts could possibly draw more people to Earthdawn via links on the web page, etc. Instead of making the art publicly available, maybe only give permission to certain people that agree only to use the artwork for actual plays or promotional podcasts or streams.
That is also a good idea. I am actually probably just going to end up forwarding this email over to the team and saying, hey, these are some great ideas. Can we put them on the agenda for a future meeting? Again, some of this comes into the trademark usage and stuff that has potential legal, not some of this has but relations. I am just not on my game tonight.
Fair.
Some of this does tie into legalities in the sense that FASA Games is technically licensing the stuff from FASA Corp, even though we are wholly owned. That has to do with maintaining trademarks and some other IP related ownership things. But
yeah,
it's a good idea.
And we'll go with that. So not to peter that one out, but we'll go with that. Number 3, have someone official hop into the chat during live streams, assuming these schedules permit, and engage with any viewers, if there are any. Wildcards on the Saving Throw Show Twitch stream often has Jody and Clint, Pinnacle's COO and Savage Worlds rules manager, respectively, hanging out in the chat during the streams. So, feasibility?
Potentially. Again, that largely depends on scheduling availability and who might do stuff.
And willingness to engage in those activities.
Certainly we'd like to engage with people. I try to do so, in a lot of cases, all you have to do to draw my attention on Twitter is mention Earthdawn in your post. Because I have a custom search that sets up and notifies me whenever somebody has it.
There you go. So, all right.
Yeah, but in general, I think, again, it's another good idea with all of us, kind of squeezing in our Earthdawn stuff around day jobs and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to reliably do something on that depends on scheduling and who's available and whatnot.
Absolutely. Number 4, perhaps giveaways. See if you can't allow some podcasters or streamers to give away coupon codes for Player's Guide PDF or maybe one of the recent releases. I don't know how it would work with FASA. Perhaps authorize the streamer podcaster to give away 1 or 2 copies and then have that particular streamer or podcaster email someone at FASA with an email of the winner so that instructions could be sent to that person to get a copy of the PDF, sort of how Kickstarter backers are flagged and given a code to download and all that stuff.
Yeah, we've done some stuff like that before. I know that we've given out PDF stuff giveaways to Shadowcasters Network when they've done like streamathons and whatnot. We've contributed some electronic product for them to give away. So it is something that we can potentially do. One of the issues is that a lot of streams are small in terms of their viewership.
Fair.
And so the potential value of giveaways is reduced. Like if a show only has like the same half dozen viewers every time, you can't like continue doing that a whole lot. Although it is potentially a way to get other people to the stream to kind of do a shared like cross promotional kind of thing. I don't know. It's
absolutely, it's possible.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. It's another, again, none of these are bad ideas.
No, got to check into the feasibility of them. See how they go. Number 5, I think lastly, work with podcast stream GMs and see if any of them can promote tease upcoming material, such as the Legends of Barsaive adventure paths. Maybe a GM is willing to run through those, or as happened with the recent announcement of Ool's death in the webcomic, see if any GMs are presently in places to tease some events like that as well. These don't have to be major events, but maybe there are storylines on the back burner that may not be getting print in the near future, but you'd like to tease those events, such as where Adelia is or what she's up to. So anyway, those are just a few of the ideas I have. Again, don't know if they're feasible or how possible they might be, but thank you, Joe, host of The Relative Dimension.
That's, again, not a bad idea. The difficulty with that is that, much like podcasts, it is not uncommon for streaming games and whatnot to like maybe have a few episodes and then peter out, that kind of thing. We talked about this in the last episode in terms of like podcast longevity. One of the difficulties there is that the time frame that we work on is kind of extended, and it's kind of sometimes difficult to coordinate that with a group. I mean, we haven't really tried it, so I don't know ultimately how it would be, how it would work out. The one thing that I do want to address, perhaps more specifically, though it wasn't really part of his question, it was just as an example.
Yes.
But you'd like to tease those events such as where Ardelia is or what she's up to. All I would like to say is if you haven't already, check out Empty Thrones, because that answers some of those questions. That answers like... There is a section in there that addresses that very subject.
Spoiler. Anyway, not spoiler.
Hopefully, we're waiting for the final layout to come back. So hopefully we will actually see the PDF release. I don't know that it will actually be out before this episode drops, but hopefully right around that time. If you backed the Empty Thrones Kickstarter and you got the pre-release draft, you know what I'm talking about.
There you go.
And so, fair listeners, what that means is, if I may tangent here, we always give early access to the manuscript to anybody who backs the book Kickstarter. So if you want to see stuff ahead of time, before it's actually released online or whatever, you just need to follow us and back our Kickstarters. And you'll see the material, a month or 2 or 3 before the general public would be able to.
A month or so early.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, on to Matthew. Thank you, Joe. On to Matthew, who also, by the way, has 5 points to make. So we're going to segue into Travar here pretty quick. Kidding. Hello, guys. Keep up the great work. I still look forward to each and every episode. Amazing. Thank you, Matthew. As for some topics, here are some ideas. 1, Metaplot. Specifically tie into the other worlds like the 2nd and the 6th.
Okay.
For a podcast episode? Sure. Okay.
Yeah, if he's talking about like subjects for this, I mean, there's not much information on the 2nd world, the Age of Dragons. I like with some prep, I could maybe speculate.
Fair.
Maybe if we do get Lou on the show, maybe that's something that we could talk about.
Talk to Lou.
It's like, hey, let's talk about some stuff that wasn't ever really explored and maybe just hinted at. What are some of your ideas of what was going on?
Nice. That'd work. Number 2, Legends. I love this aspect of the game, but I don't think there's enough out there. I
don't disagree.
Fair. I was actually thinking of recording all the Legends in the...
Legends of Barsaive?
Yeah, had to be that one. because the name escaped me. There's 30 legends in the Legends of Barsaive. I was thinking about audio recording all of them and stringing them all together to make it just the game masters pick and choose and play this for your listeners or your players, and lace the ideas in there. But there's game stuff at the end I didn't quite know how to work in. So I thought about it.
We haven't had anything that really is focused just on legends. There have been, and even the source books. Like, you'll have little bits, like in the Quest Stores or Mystic Paths book, there are some legends that are kind of referenced in some of those in-character essays. But yeah, it's not something, even in first edition, like you had the Legends of Barsaive book, you had the Book of Exploration, which was Legends 2.
2, yeah.
And then you would occasionally have like little stories and stuff like that in among other books. But I think it wasn't something that saw a lot of like dedicated focus in development. It was more something that occasionally got thrown in for flavor, which is fine. And maybe something that we can keep in mind for future development.
So here's my offer. $5 to have me record all the legends in audio.
No.
Or $25 not to have me do that. Number 3, other Namegivers. The Theran book introduced a few new ones, but I don't remember really them saying so much about any of them in Barsaive. So going into more detail on your average person reacts to them would be helpful information.
Well, that's because for the most part they aren't in Barsaive.
Yeah, they were in Thera.
He's referring to the first edition Theran Empire book introduced Jackalmen.
Yep.
Jabruk. Ulkmen, Leafers.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just the 4?
I think that was it, just the 4. I think it was just the 4, yeah.
I think it was just the 4.
I remember the picture on the page.
And they are like native to Janari, I think is the other one.
Oh,
which are
right.
from Morocco, maybe is a 5th. Anyway, yeah, like there's not much like going on how the average person reacts to them. Carl is working on a Crayana book. We don't really have a release date on that yet, but obviously that's a book that will deal with the Jackalmen in some extent. We've got a Vasgothia book that is in development. So that will probably address Leafers and Ulkmen to a certain extent. So it is something like in our development plans, that sort of stuff will show up at some point and be addressed. I don't know, like, if you're talking like subjects for the podcast, we may very well get to that, but those outside Barsaive areas, we've got a lot of like sort of core content to get through first before we start getting into some of those outlying areas and talk about some of those things. And I am not just pushing those off because I would actually have to go back and look at those books and like remind myself what actually exists.
Ditto. It's been a while. So no argument here. Number 4, the Living Legend cult. Like legends, I love this aspect, but not too much information on them. Yeah,
that's actually not a... Maybe we can pencil in somewhere down the road discussing as like a Game Master advice thing on living legend cults and what they are and how you can use them in a game. That's something I would want to think about a little bit, but it's not a bad... It's not a bad idea. It's ultimately like a living legend cult is a small secret society dedicated to a particular task, and so they can make great antagonists or rivals or allies, for your game. I had a living legend cult that I didn't actually get to use that much because the game kind of broke up fairly early. That was a cult dedicated to finding the true heir of Landis, of the throne of Landis, and was a living legend cult that was sort of dedicated to that. But that's basically living legend cults are just basically groups like a small secret societies dedicated to a particular goal, and they can therefore provide hooks for adventures. Yeah, I'm playing one in my 4th edition group. My friend is running the campaign, and he's got a living legend cult that we are actively trying to stamp out. So, yeah, I'm all for those. Number 5 from Matthew. Other places. Just a high-level overview on places that are not part of the Theran Empire. I could probably read word for word all of the material, not including Cathay. Because, like, that's got, like, multiple books devoted to it. But I could grab my Skypoint and Vivain box set off of the shelf and probably in the space of 15 minutes read everything that is not part of the Theran Empire as far as published material. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, again, one of those, like, down the road, maybe, ideas we've kind of, like, bandied around in-house about what we might do with other areas. I know Elven Nations kind of provide some tantalizing hints as to what the condition of the Scandinavian peninsula is like, in terms of what's there, more in the sense that these things kind of keep coming out from it, and they're like nasty and cause problems. There's kind of some references like that, but one of the design principles in First Edition, and in some ways we've been kind of trying to hold to it in Fourth, is of having the edges of the map, at least in a book or something that we're focusing on, be fuzzy.
Yeah.
That, like, Elven Nations, particularly the Shosara section, which is the one that deals the most with those kind of fuzzy edges. There's maybe some hints about the Scandinavian peninsula. There is some hints about, well, to the east, just massive, like, big plains of grass, and nobody, like, it's called, like, the endless something or other. I forget off the top of my head now. But, like, just big plains of grass, and nobody really knows what, if anything, is on the other side of it, because it's really, really big, and things like that. And, like, the First Edition Skypoint set in the Theran province book, the third book of the 3 booklets that's in there, has some info, like, has a couple of has like a paragraph or two on Araucania, which is clearly a reference to something in South America. There's Azania, I think is what it's called, which is like something in Africa, whether they're talking about like around Kilimanjaro or down even further in like South Africa, present day South Africa. There are some things like that are there, but not a whole lot, and left vague, intentionally so. And until we have a compelling reason to explore it, something interesting to do with it, they will sort of remain that way.
Fair. Thank you, Matthew, for all your questions. Whether we can use them either in the podcast we're doing or as development for other stuff, you've at least got the gears in motion. So how's that? So on to Shane. Shane's got a nice long email as well. So, hi, comments, questions for Josh, but feel free to use for the podcast if you like. Well, you wrote us, didn't tell us not to use it, so we're going to use it. I have just finished the Cavalryman episode. Of all the disciplines, it is the one that requires a specific situation to be able to act to its full, that is, being mounted. A comparison could be made to the air sailor, but I see that as being a little bit of a false comparison, as the vast majority of the air sailor's talents can still be used as normal off of a ship. Whereas without a mount, the cavalryman can only really use about 30 to 50% of their talents, if that. How would it work in terms of giving the cavalrymen the standard versions of most talents, avoid blow, wound balance, etc., and a method that would allow them to use those talents when mounted? This would also allow them to be equally useful off of a mount. Clearly, some talents should be retained for mounted only, charge, for one. Some might say it could be unbalanced, but I would question that, as they will be not as warrior as a warrior, and nobody complains that the air sailor or sky raider can be effective off-ship. Perhaps a gateway talent that each rank of which allows the cavalryman to assign a non-mounted talent from a specific list to mounted use. How feasible would that be? And how would you approach the above idea if not with a gateway talent? A lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there is.
Sorry. Thank you, Shane. So
thank you, Shane.
Let's let Josh kind of unpack this.
I think understanding that this is not in any way, like, this is just me kind of talking through this off the top of my head.
So Josh is going to spitball it here.
I think that, so there's a couple of different ways to approach this, I would think. One would be to potentially do away with the cavalryman effectively as a standalone discipline, and to instead make the cavalryman a path that basically gave them access to a bunch of knacks only available to cavalrymen that allow them to do all of this cool stuff while mounting.
Being on a mount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's one possibility. I honestly, though, I think that kind of loses a little bit of, I don't know, potentially runs into the issue of maybe like losing a little bit of flavor. I think the cavalryman as a discipline is really, really nice in terms of world building, even if it isn't particularly effective when it comes to your typical campaign situation, right? That's one of the problems with the cavalryman is that because it is kind of so niche in one regard that your standard campaign kind of runs into problems with it unless you're playing a windling with a Zoke or a Q or something like that. That, you know, typically your orc cavalryman group is, you know, running into issues. But yeah, like a cavalryman without his mount is kind of in trouble because he's got melee weapons. He doesn't really have avoid blow. He's got trick riding, which can be used as avoid blow when he's mounted. You know, charge doesn't do you any good if you're not mounted. Absolutely, like the cavalryman can kind of runs into that situation. But yeah, potentially doing it as a path, but like this feels like it's a point where I would probably only approach that if I were doing like a heavy radical redesign of some potentially sacred cows in terms of how Earthdawn does things, like on such a broad level that it wouldn't be just a matter of, oh, we're going to remove cavalrymen as a discipline and just make it a path that is most common among warriors or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I understand maybe the thought process that he's going with, and there comes a point where you just kind of need to say, it's the way it is, and if it's not working for you, maybe pick something else. Like, you don't necessarily need to make everything identical. That's not really the word I'm looking for. But it's like it's like, you know, people who complain, for example, and I'm not calling anybody out or just kind of saying in general, but like, if there are complaints about, say, the illusionist, and the illusionist is not, like, when it comes to like their spell selection and their play style, an illusionist doesn't play like an elementalist. Well, no, because an illusionist isn't an elementalist. If you want an elementalist, play an elementalist. Don't play one. You know, or you know, if like, oh, well, I'm playing a troubadour and I'm not happy that I'm as good in combat as certain things have certain styles and flavor, and you pick them in part for that style and flavor, not because they are the most potent or the best or whatever. And I am not saying at all that Shane is like seeking to do this with the cavalrymen. It just feels like there are some disciplines, cavalrymen probably being one of the best examples of that are useful in particular circumstances that, you know, they just aren't as broadly useful as like some others in terms of like what percentage of campaign styles they are most applicable to.
Agreed. My only suggestion otherwise is, and no, you can't use karma on them, but anything you want to do to be more effective off your mount, take as a skill and bump those ranks up as well. That's a way to be more effective off of your mount. You can't use karma on your skills, but it doesn't hurt. So it's the game's built in 8 ranks of skills for that big old list, and avoid blows on there. Charge is on there as well. Yeah,
and you can always learn skills after the fact.
Yeah. So
I don't know. It feels like I
don't get my talent progression, but I'll go pick it up as a skill.
I feel ill-equipped to answer this question off the cuff, because this is one of those questions that, like, I think about it and I go, okay, let me go back and actually compare, like, how many unique talents does the cavalryman have? Like, how many things do they have that are theirs, basically, looking at discipline talents, looking at talent options and things like that. And how many things are theirs? And those are obviously things that define a cavalryman to a certain extent.
Yes.
What do you do with those kind of after?
No, and that's a fair question.
I don't know. I've been
listening to the Legends of Earthdawn podcast where Rusty is playing a windling on a Zoke cavalryman. But there have been times where he doesn't have the space to build up for his charge. And there have been times when his Zoke has been wounded. And there have been times where he's, and I'm only like into like episode 32, where he's flying away and he can't, and he's got 4 horrors after him. He can't run around and charge because that's just a suicide mission. So he's shooting arrows, which is also not in his wheelhouse for a cavalryman, but he's, you know, he understands I can't use karma on this skill to, you know, to shoot arrows, whatever the case may be. So he's He's making do with the best he's got, but he knows his primary role is a murder machine on his Zoke, and that's what he's there for. So he knows, and Cliff has done a good job of balancing out when he can and cannot be used because, sorry, there's no room to build up for that charge right now. Find something else. Do something else. So yep. I agree. I'm a little ill-equipped to answer without having broken down the talent list as well and the options to say this many are meant for use on a mount because most of them should be. That's your job.
Yeah, it feels like the question is leaning towards, is making cavalrymen a path a better solution for that people can then add on to their characters if the game ends up being one where cavalrymen would be useful? And from a mechanic standpoint, maybe, but from a setting standpoint, I think you lose a lot of world building as a result, which is what makes me hesitant to do that.
Fair. I think that's a reasonable answer. Is one better mechanically and is one better for flavor? No, I'm with you because this is an iconic Earthdawn thing that you don't find in a lot of other games. But no, I think that's a reasonable answer to say for flavor, it exists there and should be there. And mechanics, maybe the mechanics now that we've discovered paths, or at least been able to work out mechanically what paths are, maybe mechanically it is better, but I still think, yeah, cavalrymen need to be there. Just, they do.
Yeah, but it also, like, within the framework of what paths are, it still doesn't feel right, because paths generally are like a mystery cult or secret society or something like that, and cavalryman feels too broad and too general for that to be the case. Agreed.
So, no, paths are the mechanics, to your point, and then the flavor and generality of cavalrymen is too widespread, as you said. So I think you're right. There's a conflict there. Not going to find an answer on this show today.
Good. Well,
thank you, Shane, for the
thank you.
Topic. That'll get mulled over in our subconscious for the next few weeks. I guarantee it. On to Aaron. Last and certainly definitely not least, because I think this is one of the longer emails we got in the entire milieu in the last week. So good morning to you both from across the pond once again. Well, we record at night, but you don't know that, so it's okay. Previously, I mentioned that I am playing an Obsidian from the Delaris Mountains from the Brotherhood that are close to the Rockhorn Moot that make their homes there. While Omar is an Obsidian, I feel he has a strong connection to the Highland troll culture because of his homeland and backstory, and because of this feels drawn to the Sky Raider discipline as a potential secondary discipline. I recognize that this is mechanically doesn't add much to my character, so is mainly for flavor, and also that it would be a little unusual, but seems like the most fitting secondary discipline to take. He is also in the middle of trying to rid himself of a horror mark he obtained while the Circle of Dawn attempted to cleanse a life rock of a horror infesting it, which led me to a passage on the Horror Stalker path, which suggested that Horror Stalkers are adepts that had once been marked and had rid themselves of the horror responsible, which again fits Omar pretty well, or will once he has dispatched the wretched thing. So my question, second discipline versus paths. Are there any major benefits for one over the other, or is this largely character-player preference?
Largely character-player / player preference. The idea behind paths is something that allows you to expand into particular themes without needing to create like an entire discipline. Under earlier editions, Horror Stalker was a discipline and runs into some potential viability options when you start thinking about like what they do and what their objective is, that they always felt like something that would be picked up as a second discipline for someone who already had some good skills and survivability abilities, because going after horrors is generally
dangerous,
a problem. And the paths framework, when we kind of came up with that, Horror Stalker fits that very, very well. Like, it is a dedicated organization that has some secrets that they keep because, you know, whatever. But that the motivation and in a large part the reasoning why a lot of them become horror stalkers is because of an experience that they have had with a horror. And it drives them a little bit nutty and prompts them to pursue and, like, slay those. Yes. The Purifier as well kind of can have that same kind of background, but takes a very different, like, emotional response to how to deal with that.
Yeah.
No, I think ultimately it comes down to character or player preference. I don't think that it's even necessarily required that you pick up a second discipline or a path. They are options basically that allow a lot of new widgets and toys and stuff to become available, and people like those for their characters. Mechanical bits are fun to add on and to play with. But no, I don't think that there are any major benefits one over the other. I think the major benefit of a path over an additional discipline is that paths are going to give you access to some unique talents potentially, but also a lot of knacks that you will not otherwise get access to. And some of those, depending on the path, can be really, really cool.
Fair.
A second discipline is generally something that would be picked up when you are looking at a much more major shift in a character's goals or personality to sort of accommodate the philosophical complexities that are involved in following a second discipline, which are not quite the same with a path, and quite often to help potentially fill in gaps gaps in the skill set of the group or the character.
So I'm going to add on. Cool. I was going to add on a thought to Aaron's question, which is second discipline, path, quester.
Yeah, Questor is another option. Questor doesn't quite have the same degree of mechanical options that a path does. They are similar, at least on a superficial level, in terms of how the mechanics work. But Questor is, I think, quite a bit more devoted into the role-playing aspect than a path might be, just because of the dedication required and the relationship between the questor and their chosen patron. But they are very similar, and I think the choice ultimately comes down to the player and their conception of the character and what the character might be wanting to do.
Fair. I just we haven't had a lot of questions about questors in the last few emails. So figured I would bring them up because I have it slated that we're going to talk about some questors pretty soon. Okay, so more from Aaron. On the question asked about starting a new group with fresh players, I recently did this. And 2 of the 4 players are new to the game as well. I picked a central spot on the map, Surveillance, did a little research into the politics of the area and came up with a Theran sympathizer plot in the town, which led the group into the servos to find information on a slaver's staging area set up in an old manor house. They took it upon themselves to free the slaves while they were there too. The point was to introduce what is now a fairly minor threat to Barsaive in the Therans, while giving them a relatively easy mission to get grips with the system, the mechanics and environment. It seemed to work well enough for my first try, but as it was a fairly central, I found it easy to create a bit of sandbox of a campaign. They have a choice of directions to travel, and I just have small plots here and there to keep them busy while I plan the big event in the next area. On the ideas for celebrating the Earthdawn Survival Guide's anniversary, how about a live Q&A on Discord that you can record and post up with the inclusion of some of the GMs and players from the actual play podcast or streams, and maybe some of the big names in the game? Maybe a good opportunity for Josh and the other developers to ask questions of the consumer to get some first-hand feedback from those playing and running games.
That's cool. One of the... I don't think it'll end up being an anniversary show thing, but actually one of the things that I want to do is have Kyle on and like record a conversation between me and Kyle talking about Empty Thrones and the work that went into that and the development of that sort of thing, because I think that would be interesting, and I want to talk about it. I want the book to actually be officially out so that I can talk more about it. Because I am so happy with the way that book came out. Kyle did a really great job kind of managing that and the things that came about as a result. That's really, really cool.
All right.
I will also say that while I cannot release anything official at this time, stay tuned. When I can talk about it, I will. But if you keep an eye or an ear to official FASA news sources like the Discord or the blogs or whatever, that there may be similar kinds of things coming down the road.
Fair enough. So that pretty much wraps up the episode here for Email Palooza 3.
Yes.
We did not actually say you can contact us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com, but we will say that now.
But we just
So
did.
if you have any questions for us or want to tell us how your group is doing, We just did.
I just mentioned sort of the official channels. Of course, you can find me on Twitter. You can find Dan on Twitter, although he is nowhere near as active as I am. There's, of course, the official Earthdawn Survival Guide Twitter feed, which I keep an eye on as well. Facebook, although I have been kind of reducing the amount of that in my life lately because I just can't these days.
Fair. Oh, we should give a shout out because the Earthdawn Survival Guide Twitter feed absolutely just found a new Earthdawn live play podcast.
Yeah, maybe.
Radio Free Earthdawn. Free Earthdawn.
Yeah. Yep. It's another.
They get a shout out as well.
Yep. There's another actual play. Yeah, there's a few of them. I'll have to put together a like a summary of hey, here's the stuff that's going on now.
And that connection.
As my time is so limited, I have not actually had much of a chance to listen to it. So
fair.
But yes, Radio Free Earthdawn is the name of it, and you should be able to find it if you search for that.
Yeah, and the first episode I think is 33 minutes long, so easily squeezable into anybody's non-busy day. How's that? So anyway,
what are those like?
Josh, thanks for making the time.
Thank you, Dan.
And
apologies to.
Happy to be here.
You know, our email shows are fine, but apologies for being like out of it. It has been hecka crazy at work.
No, it's okay. It's been a day. Nothing to worry about. We will be on the ball next time around, guaranteed. When we will talk about.
Yes, we've got a couple of actual content episodes planned coming up here for the very near future.
Because we have one discipline left to talk about, and I'm pretty sure Spirits and Summoning is slated very soon.
Yeah, there we go.
So. Anyway, folks, that'll take care of us for now, and you know where to find us. If you don't, you're not trying hard enough, but otherwise, it is time for you to go email us your legend.
Good night, everybody.